Jeannette McGill, and I'm an 8,000 meter mountaineer. Getting there because of having a pedigree from a couple of other mountains as well along the way. But I am based in Melbourne. However, I am South African and have also spent a bit of time in Colorado in America. So one of these modern people that has a global footprint, I suppose, Sarah.
Absolutely. So where did you grew up in South Africa?
Yes, I did.
What was that like?
South Africa is an amazing country. I miss it. I miss the outdoors, and there's some amazing places in South Africa to grow up. So I grew up on the coast in a place called Port Elizabeth, which I guess is halfway along the coast between Cape Town in the west and Durban in the east. And Port Elizabeth is, I guess, about halfway along that route. And there's amazing outdoor spaces and mountains in the Cape Fold Belt that run along this area. That was my stomping ground, the place where I grew up. And then, of course, we have the Drakensberg, which is one of my absolute favorite places on the planet to be able to go and see the highest parts of South Africa, Lesotho, with some absolutely incredible views. So I do often go back and look at my photographs of South Africa. Can't wait to be back. But in this global world, it was a job opportunity that brought me to Australia.
So how did you first start getting into mountaineering? Was that through your family? Was that in your childhood, or did that happen later on?
Yeah, so I've been very fortunate to have been on this trajectory for a very long time. Only recently I sort of looked back and really realized how much organic knowledge and experience and exposure I've had the opportunity to have since I've grown up. My father was a university professor, my mother a pharmacist and housewife, and they really enjoyed the outdoors. I attended a local school, and it was my mother. She was into all kinds of clubs and societies. She belonged to the bird club and the trees and the flowers and the stamps. Those things sort of lost and paled in significance when I started going out with the Mountain Club of South Africa. So from a very young age, I had been walking with the Mountain Club of South Africa. My first mountain that I climbed was when I was 8 years old. It was on a family holiday when we were in Cape Town, and underneath the looming heights of Table Mountain is Lion's Head. And I was very proud as an 8-year-old girl to scramble my way up using the chain ladders and the chain ropes that exist on Lion's Head to stand on this mountain, which was my very first and definitely wasn't going to be my last.
Yeah. Do you remember what your dreams were as a little girl? Like, do you remember what you wanted to do, what you wanted to be when you were sort of growing up?
I always enjoyed the outdoors. As I progressed into the Mountain Club of South Africa, the opportunity to explore, the opportunity to do an activity that required stamina, that required endurance, really suited me well. And I really enjoyed the contemplative thinking that one could have in those outdoors. And so with this time in the outdoors, I really wanted to work in nature conservation. The quintessential African picture of wearing khakis and driving a 4x4 off into the African sunset was something that resonated with me. When I was at school, I helped lead for the Wildlife Society. I started an environmental club at school, and it was really this direction that I thought that I was going into. With my father being at the local university, instead of studying the nature conservation course that I intended, I ended up doing a Bachelor of Science degree, and my subject choices afforded me the opportunity to continue being in the outdoors. So I majored in zoology and geology as this undergraduate degree, and I also got a job working for the National Parks Board during the summer vacations whilst I was studying. So indirectly, I did get a glimpse of the nature conservation world and working for the National Parks Board at the Tsitsikamma National Park in South Africa. But then my career path really started when I entered the mining space.
Yeah. So you were 8 years old when you climbed Lion's Head. and you've got this passion for the outdoors and for nature. When did you start thinking about the 8,000 meter mountains? When did you start thinking, yeah, I want to go and climb some big mountains in the world?
There's two ways to answer this: either very early on or far too late. I think is the challenge. I thought about it when I was at high school. I was reading the books around Bonington and Venables and all these illustrious men climbers that were doing these incredible faces on these high mountains. But, this was the 80s, it was the 90s, and there were very few female role models in the South African context. So whilst I worked at an outdoor shop as well, always having to be in the background, listening to the guys put on and talk around these amazing expeditions. So, whilst I thought about it and I thought, wow, that would be a nice thing to do, it never sort of crossed my mind that it could actually be practically possible, I guess, when we were brought up on this fairly staid trajectory. So the second way of answering this, it was in 2013, I'd come back from living in America, and I spent a bit too long on the couch, and spending too long on the couch eating convenience store food meant that I'd put on a bit of weight. And when I saw the scale go to just over 100 kilograms, I got a big fright. And I said to myself, we need to get back into something that I really enjoy. And I had dabbled in other sports. I'd been a state squash player. I've done some significant mountain biking and mountain bike races, but my true passion has always been the outdoors and the mountains. So a friend of mine, both of us had tried Kilimanjaro before. We went and did Kilimanjaro a second time. And when I went up Kilimanjaro, I knew that I'd simply reconnected with a very important part of who I am. And so I returned and decided that I am going to now use this opportunity to go and see if I can get to 8,000 meters. The reality of 8,000 meters is that significant height, and not everybody is actually able to get to that altitude. So I didn't know how my body was going to stand up to that extreme altitude, but I was prepared to give it a try. So bottom line, whilst I'd grown up and I had dreamt of all of this, it seemed always out of my reach. But then in 2013, when the whole sort of mountaineering space was really taking off again, things seemed more possible. And I set my sights on 8,000 meters in 2013.
Yeah. You talked about having that moment where you wanted to get back into something that you really enjoy. How easy was it to make that transition from the couch to getting back out there again and actually, taking those steps and doing what you needed to do? How did you sort of support yourself, motivate yourself? What sort of steps did you take to make that a reality?
So at first it was actually quite overwhelming and confusing, I will admit, Sarah, and there were, various personal reasons why I ended up in this space. And it was quite interesting that I sort of done this inventory of the various sporting things that I did and the reasons why I had done them. And it was a bit of self-reflection around the ones that I was doing for me and not for other people, which I think was quite important. Sometimes in life, we do find we start doing things for other people or for expectations. So there was a bit of soul searching that involved in that, and I weighed up the pros and cons. And then one has to start small. I did speak to somebody who has been my trainer through this whole journey. And he said to me, Jeannette, all I want you to do is walk around the block. So literally my journey to 8,000 meters started. He said, I don't care what you wear. I don't, just get out of bed, get out of the house, and I want you to walk once around the block. And that's exactly what I did. And it started in autumn of that year, and autumn became winter. And in the middle of winter, I'd gone from 1 block to 3 blocks. And I consistently just every single day went for this walk. And it's amazing how one's body can readapt. It clearly had some of the wiring in it from how I'd grown up. And the more I got in touch with myself again, the easier it became. and I could progress quite quickly. But it's that mental hurdle. But I think the trick here was doing something that was very easy, walking around the block, and also there was no expectations associated with it. I wasn't walking around the block to climb a mountain. I was walking around the block simply to watch the sunrise. And as that winter became spring, the flowers came out. And I really started once again having an appreciation for the seasons and my part in that. So it was a good journey to take, and it was a good one, yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about altitude as well. So you climbed Kilimanjaro previously, and you went back and did it a second time. But 8,000 meter peaks, it's sort of like a different kettle of fish. Could you just share more about the draw to the 8,000 meters and share a little bit more about what it's like being at that type of altitude, like what it feels like, what it does for your body, what it does to your mind, just so people who haven't been that high can relive or think about what it's going to be like at that height?
Sure. So, 8,000 meter mountains are all in the death zone, and it's simply the death zone because the air pressures are so reduced there that the effective oxygen levels are way less than what they would be at the normal sea level or normal altitudes. My journey into the mountains started actually prior to Kilimanjaro. My first big peak that I did was in Peru in 2000. So I got to 6,000 meters in Peru. And that was an absolutely amazing window into this world. The Cordillera Blanca of Peru is a sublime mountaineering spot. So I knew in 2013 that I'd already been to 6,000 meters in 2000, and that this was a part of me that I was reconnecting with. And it's about sequentially getting yourself adapted to these altitudes. So I didn't jump straight from the 6,000s into the 8,000s. I did build up a repertoire of 7,000 meter mountains as well. But at that altitude, the strain on one's body can be extreme. Anything that takes very quickly at sea level will take forever at altitude. Simple things, putting on one's shoes, boiling some water, everything takes an increased effort. You feel like you are operating in a vacuum. But at the same time, everybody's going through this around you as well. I tend to have a couple of distinctive elevations that my body struggles with, and it's happened on various of my trips, so it's a pattern. And I think everybody goes through this. Your body tends to adjust around the 4,000 meter mark, then it adjusts again around the 5,800 or so, and then you've got around 6,400. I think these are just critical pressure differentials, and the process that your body will tend to accommodate these new altitudes. You'll probably feel a little bit nauseous, a bit of a headache when you cross these boundaries, and your body will adapt. And it's also the importance of having the sequential acclimatization, whereby once you go high, you come back down to base camp, your body starts firing, producing more red blood cells, and the next time you go up to this extreme height, that much better. So it's an important part of mountaineering that it's a patient process, it's a sequential process, and the more times you go to altitude, the more you are able to listen to your body and know what these very important markers are, because we are all very familiar with the unfortunate outcome when one might go to altitude too quickly, and the bad side effects that one will have, and potential death if you were to get HAPE or HACE.
Mentally, when you're climbing mountains, what's going through your head? Like, what are you thinking about? What's going through your head? Are you very goal focused? Are you constantly checking in with yourself? Are you trying to distract yourself by either listening to music or listening to podcasts? Are you completely in the zone? How does it work for you?
It's a great question, because everybody seems to tackle this portion differently, but the biggest commonality around mountaineers and mountaineering is there is a level of single-minded focus. Yes, there might be a team and there's a whole group of people on the mountain and you've got people supporting you, but you do have to carry yourself through the process. And it is a very mental process, mountaineering, because the pace is so slow. You've got to be able to have significant endurance. The endurance mindset and the stamina mindset is something which is very important in high altitude mountaineering. Personally, I love listening to music. So if things get quite tough and I know that there's a very steep portion that I have to step out, and if it's safe, obviously when one is wearing crampons and if you're going through an ice fall from a mountain leadership perspective, it isn't recommended that you wear earphones. But in places where it's flatter and less dangerous, yes, I will tend to put a podcast on. I quite enjoy making specific expedition playlists that I can listen to as I go on. I know other people that really don't want to listen to music, whereas for me, I do find that music just puts me in a slightly numbed mental state, and it does remove some of the pain. But at other times where you can't play music, it's literally you going step by step. And this is the challenge. One's mind does start talking to you and saying strange things, and the mind can be quite brutal. The level of self flagellation that the brain can do. You didn't train hard enough. Remember that day when you didn't get up in time? How do you think that you can, climb this far, etc., etc.? So it is a little bit of a war that goes on with one's mind. But this is, I think, the importance of what one gains from mountaineering. It is that mental resilience. It is the mental stamina. It is that opportunity to push yourself to levels which you would never normally find down at sea level. So the mountaineering space, it's a mental game. There's a lot of people when the weather comes in and delays are made and the environment is quite tough, that people pack up, they go home, they just say this isn't for me. So the mental stamina that's required to do 8,000 meter mountaineering should not be underestimated.
Where do you think you get your mental stamina from, your mental grit, your mental resilience, your determination, your focus? Where do you think that comes from?
I've always been a fairly focused individual, and it's a trait which I guess that I've always just had, and I've been a natural leader and led right from when I can remember. And I think these opportunities to lead other people and to show other people what is possible has also underpinned some of the resilience, because that patience and resilience goes hand in hand with showing other people with what is possible.
What's it been like for you being in the mountain space, being in the 8,000 meter, these big mountains? What's it like being a woman in the mountains doing mountaineering at the level that you climb at? How have you found it?
It's really changed over the years. I think the biggest thing, what we get out of mountaineering, is that spirit of comradeship and camaraderie that comes with, really pitting oneself against the elements, against the mountain itself. And there's a really strong culture of camaraderie that exists amongst the expeditions, amongst the people in that space. And it's something which I really enjoy as well. When I started, most usually I was probably the only woman in these trips. And that wasn't something that I wasn't unused to. My job on the deep level South African gold mines meant that I was always a woman in quite a technical role in a very tough environment. So I do think that my career opportunity also tied into my mountaineering space. Things have changed significantly over the past few years, 10, 20 years, in that a lot more women are getting involved in 8,000 meter mountaineering, and there's definitely space for more. I think at the end of the day, it's not around gender, it's around the mental fortitude and makeup around being able to thrive in these outdoor spaces. And interestingly, women, especially women, 30s, 40s, 50s odd, we're really good with stamina. We are able to pace ourselves. And so therefore, a lot of the female mountaineers that are available at the moment are exceptionally strong in terms of mindset and capability in the mountains.
Absolutely. Let's talk about Manaslu. Tell us more about your dream for climbing Manaslu, and how and when you wanted to climb it, and how you made that dream a reality.
Sure. So, the most famous of all the 8,000-meter mountains is, of course, Everest, because it's the tallest one, and it's the one that garners quite a lot of airtime, especially in the spring of every year. But there are 14 8,000-meter mountains in the world. So there are 14 mountains that all go into the death zone, and they all have very similar sort of things you have to do, ladders or ice falls that one knows about from public press around Everest. So they stretch from just over 8,000 meters high, the lowest of these 14, to, of course, Everest, the highest. And so when I may set my mind up that I wanted to climb an 8,000-meter mountain, for me, it's not necessarily ticking off something that's on the well-known list. I like to immerse myself similarly the way I've climbed in Iran. I've done stuff in Kyrgyzstan as well. I like doing things that are just slightly out of the ordinary. And also I appreciated that I wanted to develop some more exposure at this altitude. So my first mountain that I chose was actually Cho Oyu. But unfortunately, the season that I chose to climb Cho Oyu, there was no access granted to that mountain. So at the last minute, I switched. I was given an opportunity to trade, and I went for Manaslu. I didn't know much about Manaslu at that stage. And just before I left, I realized and I uncovered that only one other South African had ever summited Manaslu, and that was my friend Louis Carstens. And if I were to summit, I would become the very first South African woman to summit Manaslu. So it was never a primary goal of mine, but nonetheless, when I found that out, it was like, okay, this is quite interesting that so few people from South Africa have been afforded this opportunity, and let me do my best to represent the mountaineers of South Africa. And so I went in 2015 to Manaslu. It's an absolute incredible area of Nepal. There is a trek that goes around the Manaslu area. It's called the Manaslu Circuit, not unlike the Annapurna Circuit that's quite popular with the trekkers. And I definitely recommend the Manaslu trek as well for people to do. And made my way up the mountain. And unfortunately, we had some bad weather, some small accidents on the mountain. And so the service provider that I was with, together with a couple of the other major service providers, made the decision that our clients and the group's clients would come down the mountain. So my first attempt, I did not summit. I then subsequently relocated. I got the job in Australia. So I had to wait a bit of time before I had the time available from a work schedule to go and try again. And I decided to go back. For me, Manaslu was unfinished business. I like to finish what I start. So I went back in 2018 and summited. And it was an absolute huge privilege to be able to hold the South African flag on the summit of Manaslu. And it was an incredible journey.
What was the biggest challenge from summiting Manaslu?
The biggest challenge is the last portion of the mountain, in that I'd done all the hard parts, I'd done all the training, my mental grit and determination had got me to the summit of the mountain. And then I happened upon the slowest moving line, the longest queue possible. And yes, the public press has shown us the lines that occur on Everest at the moment, and it's a reality of modern day mountaineering. So I was about halfway in that day's queue on the summit of Manaslu. And so for me, quite frankly, the hardest part was standing still in a line that was inching forward. The sun rose. I could see what the world looked like from 8,000 meters, and it was absolutely stupendous. But at the same time, I'd mentioned previously around how our brains talk to us, and this little mind on my shoulder was saying to me, Jeannette, you're here. You're cold, you're uncomfortable, let's just go down. You're at the summit. And then the other voice on my shoulder tapped me back and said, no, Jeannette, you want to be the first South African woman, you have to stand in this line. So I stood in the line for just under 3 hours before I got a chance to, step over the rope, clip in, stand on the actual summit and look at the view. And it was amazing. So that was the hardest part, but also the most satisfying part.
No. How do you deal with the because the word that I'm thinking of is frustration. Like I would be frustrated. Like, but also I also get that, you know, it's a big goal that everyone wants, and, you know, we're part of the problem because we're up there with everybody else wanting to achieve this goal, you know, get to the summit. But how do you handle that frustration and just waiting? Like, oh.
Yeah, you know, it's definitely at first a bit like being stuck in a traffic jam on a highway, but then it comes to a bit around presence. You know, it's about mindfully being aware of where you are and what you've personally sacrificed to do to be in that point. And I think that's when my frustration dissolved. You know, there's an element of mindfulness, and I always, you know, that's the great part about being in Nepal, the Sherpa community, and some of the, you know, the ethos that comes up with them, and it's around being able to be patient. However, there's a practical side to this as well, and as the mountain and mountaineering becomes a more sought after sport, I do think that practically one has to have the necessary tools and skills that you anticipate these lines. And the more you've anticipated the lines, the less frustrated you will be. I guess it would be about, if you know that you're going to be going into a traffic jam down on the highway, you haven't chosen an alternative route in time, and you think to yourself, okay, well, I'll end up in the traffic jam. There's a magazine next to me, or let me think around this problem. And so therefore, similarly on the mountains, for me, it's around, the biggest thing is around cold management. So if you know you're going to go and be in one of these queues and lines, it's around actively engaging one's toes, moving your toes in your boots all the time, moving your fingers in your gloves all the time. It's around having an extra pair of hand warmers if that's required for that time that you're going to be standing there. And so cold management is a very important portion. And then the second aspect is around oxygen management. So you are standing there on your oxygen. The Sherpas are able to assist you by turning your oxygen down whilst it's just on a low flow rate. Oxygen will always keep you warmer. And so it's around, therefore, being able to anticipate how long am I going to potentially be standing in this line for? What impact is that going to have on my oxygen depletion? Do I need to have paid for an extra canister or cylinder of oxygen? So there are a couple of practical things that one can do around cold management, around oxygen management, around refueling oneself, that you've done these practical steps such that if you're in there, you can then be mindful around, okay, I've thought about that this could happen. And so therefore there is no sense in being frustrated with yourself or being frustrated with the other mountaineers around you. It's a moment in time where you get to really look at the view.
Yeah. I'd love to talk a little bit more about almost like the practicalities of climbing Manaslu. So how does it actually work for you? So are you sort of organising the trip yourself and getting over there and hiring your own Sherpas? Are you going with a company? Are you going as part of a group? Then how does it work in terms of climbing up the mountain? So with Everest, you've got the base camp, camp 1, camp 2, camp 3, camp 4, and you're going up and down to do with the acclimatization. How does that work on Manaslu? Like, what's the length of time needed to summit that mountain?
So all the 8,000 meter mountains, they're all in this death zone, and they all have a very similar trajectory and profile. So largely 4, sometimes 5 camps along the way, and they all have exactly the same process, whereby you sequentially go to camp 1, spend a bit of time there, come back down to base camp, and then go up to camp 2 and come back down. In the modern times, there are some service providers that tend to have what we call as one long rotation, as opposed to a lot of these up and down rotations, and that boils down to strategy. So strategy actually plays quite a big part in the journey of these 8,000 meter mountains. And so therefore, for me, for Manaslu, there was a difference between my first time and my second time, in that the first time I did do the camp 1 back to base camp, camp 2 back to base camp, and my second time I just went for one long rotation, which meant that I went to camp 1, I slept there. I went to Camp 2, slept there, went up and touched Camp 3, and then came all the way down to base camp. So there are these strategies, and it also depends on the type of service provider that you choose, oftentimes, is what strategy you adopt. So in the world of high altitude mountaineering, things have really pivoted over the years. From back in the day, it was military teams and also country-specific expeditions. You know, the British, with their proximity due to the presence in India, did a lot of the initial trips into the Himalayas. And then other countries, you know, the French did Annapurna, etc. So then things started becoming slightly more commercial. Before that, we had the years of people like Chris Bonington and a range of mountains and Venables that they did a range of these Himalayan ascents. But then, you know, as things took off into the early 90s and the companies came on board like Adventure Consultants and Mountain Madness, and we saw the rise of an advent of commercial mountaineering. And that's really where the bookends are today. You can go and climb a mountain on your own. You can go and procure your own climbing permit. And then there is the far more commercial hand-holding that occurs with some of the places as well. There's a bit of a middle road as well, where you've got people that are prepared to do logistics for you. So your base camp environment will be very set up. You pay for base camp support and some mountain logistics, people that might help you carry gear and set up camps. But at the end of the day, the more experienced you are, you migrate from a far more commercial hand-holding experience up the ladder to slightly more able to make your own decisions and look at the decision-making yourself. And this is the journey that I've definitely been on. By getting more experience at these altitudes, I far prefer being able to have companies that also allow me to be part of my own decision-making on the mountains. You know, if you're going to be climbing Everest, if you're climbing Manaslu, these are all going to take around 6 to 8 weeks. And so I really don't want to be forced to have to follow a schedule. And so having a greater degree of flexibility around weather, around being on the mountain is a great place to be in. But one does have to be slightly more experienced to be have this independence on the mountain. So when you're starting off with the space, you know, it's obviously very good to be able to investigate who some of the service provider companies are. There's some amazing ones globally, and they will teach you a lot of things along the way as well as you carry on this journey.
Absolutely. And you've actually, one of your mountaineering goals, well, I'll let you explain your mountaineering goals, but it's your version of the 7 summits. Do you want to explain what one of your mountaineering goal is?
It's actually quite unique that I'm talking about this, because I haven't actually spoken a lot about the fact that we know the 7 summits exist, and the 7 summits are the highest mountain on every single continent. And it's a tick list a lot of people do. And my passion is the 8,000 meter mountains. I know that I can do well at that altitude. They're 14, as we already say. But I've decided that I want to embark on doing my version of the 7 summits, which is 7 of those 14 8,000 meter mountains.
Fantastic. And how's that going?
It's going well, you know. So we've got Manaslu, and last year I climbed Dhaulagiri. Also didn't summit. Hopefully return to Dhaulagiri next year once we can all start traveling around the globe again. And then we'll have the oyster to choose the next 5, and I'm looking forward to the process.
Yeah. Tell us more about, I'm going to mispronounce it massively, Dhaulagiri. Where is that? How is it? Like, I haven't heard of that mountain.
Yeah, and this is the very interesting thing around the 8,000 meter mountains, right, is that nobody really has heard of the other mountains. It's Everest that gets its lion's share of all the attention and all the press, and sometimes that is a challenge to be able to stick with one's goals, even if they aren't necessarily so much in the public eye. So Dhaulagiri is the most western of the 8,000 meter mountains that occur in Nepal. So various of these mountains are in Nepal, and the rest are all in the Karakoram in Pakistan. The closest 8,000 meter mountain to Dhaulagiri is Annapurna, so they're right next to each other. And the closest city, as it were, is Pokhara. So one flies from Kathmandu to Pokhara and then goes up into the Mustang area, which is very different to the Solo Khumbu, where Everest and Lhotse and Makalu are all associated. So Dhaulagiri, not as well known as the other 14,000 mountains. It's a beautiful mountain. All the other 8,000 are all part of a range of mountains, whereas Dhaulagiri very much stands on her own in the middle of an amazing glaciated terrain. The first part of Dhaulagiri is probably the hardest. There's a portion on the mountain called the Eiger. It looks very similar to the Eiger, and the rock falls just shower off of this face. And so it's hard, not really technically, but it's hard in that you have to move very fast and you have to go past in the early hours of the morning when things are cooler and the rocks are iced in, because from mid-morning onwards, it just becomes a torrential rock fall down this Eiger. So it's a bit of playing dodgem cars with the boulders as they fall down as you make your way under this portion. And then you end up on the Dhaulagiri ice field and make your way up to Camp 2 and up to Camp 3. So it's a beautiful mountain and one which I really look forward to summiting.
Is it a busy mountain? Because, because it hasn't, it's, a lot of people won't have heard of it, even though it is one of these 8,000 meter peaks. Is it still easy to sort of get the commercial expeditions over to it? Does it make it more expensive because it's maybe not as popular a mountain? How does that side of things work?
Actually, almost in reverse, in that Everest, because it is so popular and it receives the lion's share of interest, the base camp of Everest is a significant size. And also the permit fee for Everest is quite significant. And obviously it's important for a country like Nepal to be able to use the royalties that come in from these permit fees. So Dhaulagiri, on the other hand, because it's less well known, because it's not as accessible, it's actually definitely doesn't have that many people that climb it each season. So last year when I was there was probably 4 companies that were established at base camp. So it gives a far more intimate, if one calls it that, experience of these base camps. And there's far much more incredible focus amongst the mountaineers, the teams, to be able to support each other as one undertakes this. So some of these lesser known mountains have got cheaper permit fees. So, what I'd also recommend and say to people is that if you look at the statistics, most people will take 2 attempts to climb Everest. That's on average. And obviously, there's a lot of people who do succeed the first time round, but a lot of people will take 2 or 3 attempts doing Everest. So the Everest permit fee is quite expensive. So why not go to one of the lesser known 8,000 meter mountains effectively as a bit of Everest preparation and training? And so therefore being able to give one's Everest attempt a really good crack when one is ready for that. So, I think a lot of people underestimate the opportunity to go and explore some of these other 8,000ers as they go on the Everest journey. And also the opportunity to be on a very much quieter mountain, a more remote mountain. It just makes the experience all that more special.
Yeah. One of the things is about having these magical moments on the mountains. And I'd love for you maybe to share a moment that you've experienced on a mountain, a magical moment, a magical experience that's really stuck with you.
One of my magical moments that sticks with me all the time comes from a much lower mountain. It comes from the Drakensberg in South Africa, where things really set off. And I'd had a couple of long days. I had been going along the escarpment edge, following all the high tops of the mountains. And the Drakensberg escarpment is absolutely stupendous in that you can sit with your legs dangling over the edge, and there's a 2,000 meter drop below you, down to the foothills below. And so on this particular day, the sun was setting, and I was enjoying the vista and from up below my feet came an eagle, one of Africa's amazing eagles, and it just hovered in front of my eyes, just watching me. And I watched it back. And we looked at each other for a while, and it then flew off into the thermals, into the sunset. And that magical moment has always stuck with me through all my mountaineering, in that, there's a presence, there's this opportunity once again to mindfully just sit, and then these magical moments will appear for you.
Oh, God, absolutely. I love that. Jeannette, as well, you've got a website called mcgillsmountains.com, and you do a lot of work with mountain leadership and mountain mentoring. Do you just want to share a little bit more about what you do in that space and what you offer for other people out there in terms of like offering them support in the mountains?
I love showing other people what is possible in the outdoors. So many people will think they can't do this, it's too hard, or they want to do it, but where do they start? Or they will just dive in and sign up with a company online, and that company sometimes will say the right things, but maybe it's not a good fit for that person. So in this crowded space where there is so much happening in the mountaineering space, I bring my many years of experience, my mistakes to bear, to be able to help other people. I've already spoken around that we are time poor, and we also, we want to use our financial resources carefully, and with multiple ascents, we should be able to make the best decisions off the outset. So my role as a mountain mentor is really somebody that can support people on their journey, be it Kilimanjaro, be it the Inca Trail, be it Everest Base Camp, or be it an 8,000-meter mountain, whereby I provide that guiding hand, that person who's able to know exactly what my clients' needs are. I'm exceptionally empathetic, and I really love taking people in the outdoors myself, or helping them on this journey. And I've done this previously, with a wide range of people. There was a lady who she'd never really walked even to the corner shop to go and buy a soda, and her friends encouraged her to do a 30-kilometer beach walk, and so she ended up doing a 30-kilometer beach walk. And it's that pride that I can see in people as they become more confident along the way that really drives me to be able to provide this mentoring ability to help people to clear their uncertainty, to provide the clarity, to provide the support that is definitely needed if you are serious about your mountain goals.
Well, absolutely. And where's the best place for people to follow along with your mountaineering? Is it the website, or are you also on social media as well?
So the website's fantastic, but the trips that I go on, I love to put some of the pictures up on my Instagram, which is also McGill's Mountain Instagram page. And then I do some long form writing, or longer form writing, on the McGill's Mountain Facebook page. So I don't tend to cross post. I focus on being able to write short pieces on the Facebook page. I'll put pictures on Instagram. And then, of course, on my website, you can sign up for my newsletter, Mountain Moments. And this is an opportunity to get a couple of added little bits of tidbits, insights around mountaineering and what is possible.
Fantastic. I'll make sure I put all of those links in the show notes so that people can follow along. But Jeannette, I'd love for you to leave our listeners with your final words of wisdom, final words of advice for other women who want to get out there. They want to go and experience the mountains. They want to step outside their comfort zone. What advice would you have for them?
I have 3 pieces of advice. The first piece is, don't dream it, just do it. And yes, that's, a very great cliched statement. So therefore, how do you just do it? And that comes to my second piece. And I'm from Africa. So, the paradigm around how do you eat an elephant? You eat an elephant in pieces. So, if you want to do it, look at the goal, break it down into those necessary pieces and do it one step at a time. And then thirdly, my last piece of advice is to enjoy the process. So many times we just focused on the outcome, and to enjoy the process. So don't dream it, do it, eat the elephant in pieces, and enjoy the process.
Absolutely. I love that. Jeannette, thank you so much for coming on and sharing more about your passion for the mountains and mountaineering. It's been absolutely inspiring to speak with you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Hey tribe, I hope you enjoyed that episode with Jeannette. My name is Sarah Williams. I'm the host of the Tough Girl podcast and the founder of Tough Girl Challenges, which is all about motivating and inspiring you while also increasing the amount of female role models in the media. I just want to share a lovely email that I received the other day. And this is really about the power of the Tough Girl podcast. So you may be brand new to the Tough Girl podcast, and this could be the first episode that you've listened to, or you could be a regular listener. But I just wanted to share this with you, and I'll talk a little bit about why this resonated with me. So hi, Sarah. I hope you're well and managing this current challenge that we're all experiencing. I have so much I would like to chat to you about, but I'll try to keep this short. I've discovered your podcast and YouTube videos only a month or two ago. I've watched many of your YouTube videos and I am currently working through your podcast. Firstly, I wanted to let you know that I'm really impressed by the way you interview your guests. You are fantastic at allowing your guests to speak without interruption. I love the way you review what your guest has said and help to frame your questions. And I love the open, non-judgmental approach you have to your interviews. I also love the great variety of guests that you've been able to talk to. I've just listened to your interview with Rennie McGregor, and it is this interview that has triggered me to finally reach out. I loved this interview, mostly because I am also a dietitian. For a few years now, I have been struggling with getting myself motivated to maintain a regular exercise routine. And over the last few weeks, I felt something switch in me. And I am now getting myself moving regularly, and I am feeling so much stronger than I have for a long time. I attribute this to having your podcast to listen to each day. You have helped me to get over that mental hump that I've been scrambling to get up. So I just want to say a huge thank you for what you do. I still have about 4 years of podcasts to listen to, so loads more inspiration to help keep me going. I look forward to following you and being inspired by your future adventures. All the best. So that's obviously, an amazing email to receive, but I want to point out two things from that. Is the two things is it's if you are struggling at the moment and you're struggling with your motivation and struggling to maintain like a regular exercise routine, it's okay. Trust me, I think everybody is struggling or has been through a struggle. But the fact that you are listening to this podcast right now means that you have already taken the first step in the right direction. In the email, it talks about feeling a switch in me. And I'm now, she's now getting herself moving regularly, which is absolutely fantastic. Keep listening to the Tough Girl podcast. It may not happen after one day. It may not happen after 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. It may not happen after a week, but it will happen. There will come a point where you will take that first step because your motivation has risen so much that is just what you need to do and to get yourself over that hump, to get started and to start moving, to start following your dreams and to start taking action. So wherever you are in your own personal journey, you are still moving forward. Please be kind to yourself. Please be considerate to yourself. These are tough times, and I think people are very much aware of that. But the fact that you are listening to this, that is what it's all about. Thank you so much for listening, because this is what the Tough Girl podcast is all about. It's about motivating and inspiring you. It's about encouraging you to go after your dreams. And, look, there are hundreds of episodes out there on the Tough Girl podcast. There are incredible interviews. We speak with mountaineers, rowers, swimmers, ultra runners, triathletes, travelers, explorers, survival experts. There's a whole variety of different women sharing different stories who have different backgrounds, but all of them have something to share. And what this is not about comparison. This is about you listening to episode and picking up one thing, thinking, oh, so that's what she did to overcome that issue. Okay, well, how can I apply that to my life? Please do go and visit the website, toughgirlchallenges.com. You can find more information about all of our incredible women. There's over 5 years of episodes available for you to listen to. There's more information on the Tough Girl blog. There's more information about me and some of the different challenges and adventures that I've done. The reason I'm able to share these incredible stories is due to the patrons and supporters of the Tough Girl podcast. If you would like to pay it forward, then please do go and visit Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl podcast. A massive thank you to everybody who is paying it forward, who is supporting the mission and is supporting me to help increase the amount of female role models in the media. Your support makes such a big difference and it helps to change lives. So wherever you are, whatever you're doing, give it your all, give it 110%, get after it, go for it. Believe in yourself because I believe in you. Take care. Lots of love. I'll be back with you next Tuesday for another awesome episode of the Tough Girl Podcast. Bye.